I kind of looked at when we started this process and having these conversations, there was three major areas that we had to really feel that we were confident in answering or finding the people to help us answer as we move forward. One, I look at them as kind of in my brain as silos, but one of them is like, how are we sourcing the cattle? Where's the labor? And then how are we selling the meat on the other end? So labor was one that we spent a lot of time in the beginning having these conversations, right? Like, I don't think anybody really grows up saying, what I really want to do someday is cut meat, right? But I think they haven't had those opportunities. And it's been surprising as we've gone down this journey of people really starting to ask about it and to question it. So we have found the right experts to help us with our.
Hey, I'm Shaye, and I'm your host for the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast, the beef producer's place to explore new ideas and management practices to improve their lifestyle and operation. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I want to let you know that I am now open for speaking gigs. So if you want me to lead a workshop, be on a panel, or deliver a keynote at your next event, you can connect with me on my website, casualcattleconversations.com, and just use the contact box and I'll get back to you. So with that, let's dive right in to today's episode.
Hey folks, I want to take a quick second to talk about a company that's doing some pretty cool things, because we all know as cattle producers that funding and finances can be a little stressful, but Harvest Returns makes things simpler. Cattle ranching is hard work, but finding funding to start or grow your operation doesn't have to be. While traditional bank loans still have a place in finance, some ranchers have transitioned to an alternative form of funding through passive investors. Harvest Returns has raised over $12 million for multiple cattle ranchers across the United States. Harvest Returns works with each ranch individually to help develop flexible terms that best suit the business's plan and cash flows. The company's pool of nearly 13,000 investors can help you expand your herd, fund improvements to your ranch, or help you scale to access new channels. Harvest Returns offers both debt or equity options and works within your existing operating model. To learn more about the capital raise process with Harvest Returns, visit harvestreturns.com/CCC, and I'll put that link in the show notes. All right. Well, Troy and Stacy, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today, because today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing in the industry that's a little new and not necessarily related to the cow-calf side, because you are starting North Prairie Butchery, correct?
That is right.
Awesome. And so tell the audience where you guys are located at today. Where's that located? Where are you guys located?
Yeah, so we're located kind of north central part of South Dakota. Faulkton is the name of our town. We farm and ranch here just west of Faulkton, and it's where I grew up and on our home place here. And so yeah, we've been in the cow-calf backgrounding business, I guess, for a lot of years. Stacy and I are both fifth generation in our family to be involved in beef production, and as the environment of the beef industry has continued to evolve, and we continue to look at how we could evolve our business. This here about a year and a half, 2 years ago, kind of came to us that we really needed to start investigating what it would take to build a beef processing facility of some sort. We didn't quite know what we were necessarily looking for, but started down that path, and it's kind of what got us to today is building this facility here to help with some of the harvesting issues that we've experienced over the last few years.
So you both come from ranching backgrounds, correct?
Yes, we do. Yep. And we're raising the sixth generation. We have three children that are a part of the operation. Our son is now a sophomore at South Dakota State University, but our daughters were just out helping us yesterday, trying to get the barn ready for calving.
Well, awesome. So Stacy, are you from South Dakota too?
Yep, I was raised on the western part of the state, so I'm originally from the Sturgis area, for those that think motorcycles and not cattle when they think of Meade County on that side of the state. But yeah, my family was a cow-calf producers, backgrounding operation, similar to what we do now.
Okay, so right now you're on the, when we think about the segments of the beef industry, you've got cow calf, you've got backgrounding, and you've got the meat side. So you're involved in about 3 different segments. Do you have anything else that you're kind of doing in between there too?
No, I think at this point we're covering all the bases. When I grew up, we were primarily, cow calf operation, and then we would background our calves. We've got a little backgrounding yard here, and then typically sell those calves, February time frame. They'd be weighing, 800, 900 pounds or something, and get rid of them kind of in time for calving to start again. And that was kind of how we had, done it for quite a few years, or how my dad did it. And when we took over, we wanted to look at expanding that and trying to capture more value. And so we started finishing our calves. We worked with a couple different yards down in Kansas. We would send them down there after we had backgrounded them, and they would finish them for us. And so we were retaining ownership all the way as we'd market those calves on the grid through a couple different packers down there. And so that worked for pretty well, and saw a lot of big gains in what we were trying to do. And then we'd always done a little bit of freezer beef here, and had an opportunity to grow that with a restaurant partner down in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so and that has really started to take off and do really well. And it's been a fantastic partnership with them. We've worked with them now for about a year and a half or a little longer. And we've both kind of worked out the kinks and feel like we're in a really good spot to continue to expand that. And so that's one of the reasons that we've looked at trying to build a facility, because our issue is getting these cattle harvested. We don't have a little local locker plant. We drive quite a ways now to get to a couple of different inspected facilities, and we're, it's 150 to 250 mile round trips, and we're taking, 2 to 4 at a time, and then going back, getting that meat. And so that's kind of how it all came to be. We've, struggled with getting some cattle harvested down south like we used to, and everybody sort of experienced that if you finish cattle, and whether it was COVID or packing plant issues that had to shut down for a time period. It was getting really frustrating when you had good cattle and you do all these things, and right at the end, the last thing you need is to basically harvest all your hard work and can't get it done. And then right here locally, essentially, we in our state, we've got people that are saying, boy, we'd love to buy your beef. And so why are we shipping them? Why are we shipping them 600 miles south if we've got some markets here that we could tap into? So we're basically at this point, trying to basically really going from pasture to plate at this point, calving them out here, finishing them all here, and serving them locally.
Wow, that is awesome. So do you two want to talk a little bit about, what that process looked like as far as starting North Prairie Butchery, and talk about where you're at today with that process? But how did you get started? What did that process look like?
Well, it came from finding the right people to help us, right? Like Troy said, we had kicked around this idea and we knew there was a need, but there was also this big void in who's the experts that can help us. So one of the things that we had found early on in our discovery process was a company called Protein Processors and Protein Processing Services. And what we have, they're kind of an umbrella group that has different companies under them to help with specific things. And that started with helping us with our feasibility study, right? Like it's all got to start with the numbers and what can we do, and what does that look like? And I think when Troy and I first started this conversation, we didn't have a 25 head a day facility in mind, but it quickly showed us with the numbers that that's what it really needed to be. We certainly modeled other sizes, 50, 100, but when it came down to it, the 25 head a day really fit not only what we felt comfortable with, but also our community. When you start to talk about labor and you start to talk about marketing that beef on the other end, and sourcing the cattle, of course, it was a number that we felt very comfortable with and are excited about that size and opportunity with that size. So that's where you get started. And once we had that and our business plan put together, really the pieces have just continued to fall for us in that we've hit maybe little bumps in the road or had to stop and question things or make sure that we're on track. But when you have a really good model like that, it just starts to fall together on how you accomplish it.
So what were some of those bumps and challenges then?
Oh,
just really,
yeah.
having this vision of what exactly
Right.
we wanted to build, so we, like Stacy said, we kind of got, we got the feasibility study and wrote this business plan. And then it's like, okay, so how do you want to handle different things?
Right.
How would we handle cattle receiving? How are we going to distribute meat? How are we going to, what services are we going to provide? What type of packaging and labeling and are we going to do aging and smoking and you name it, right? You start to go down this long list of
right. How big does the cooler need to be? How big does the freezer need to be? How I think it's more of just those like Troy said, processing through literally in our conversations with other experts and people of what they need to do. A project of this size takes financing and it takes partners that have vision. It takes keeping up with your numbers on it feels like a year ago when we really started to have this process put in place. We're in a completely different world financially than we were a year ago, right? And so those have been some of the challenges, but certainly not something that's held us back or deterred us in any way.
So did you go look at other facilities similar to that size and bigger, or what did that process look like so that you could see what was going to work? Because the inside of whether it's a large packing plant or a small butchery, they can be so vastly different and there are so many moving parts and pieces.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any two of them that
no,
look alike.
No, there really
so
isn't.
There's no magic stamp that you can put on and say, here's the perfect thing. Because it really came down to what, all the things we wanted to do inside of there actually too. And so, yeah, we were very fortunate. We got to go, we looked at a facility over in Wyoming. We looked at one down in Missouri. Stacy and I, through our experiences from clear back at our days at South Dakota State University, have been into packing plants at different times over the years and seen some, seen the big ones. And so we've kind of had a feel for that too. But I think that was one of the things that we really liked about going and looking as we saw a brand new facility, heard some things that they wish they'd have done differently. We saw a place that it was a remodeled building that they turned into a small locker plant, and and what was the challenges there and what the wish they'd done different. And so it's kind of like building anything, whether it's a house or a small packing plant. Everybody, after they build one, wishes maybe they'd done a few different things, done things a little bit differently. And so we will too when we're all done, I'm sure. But we did learn a lot through that process and was really valuable. And sometimes it's just, maybe it's even more learning things, here's learning what not to do, probably helps as much to guide you as learning what you should do.
Yeah, I think that's been really valuable, is the opportunity to go see and meet with people. For the most part, people have been so giving on that open kind of door to say, well, I wish we would have done it like this, or this is what we're going to do different when we build on, or, whatever the conversations were that we've had. And really our protein processing has really helped us too with that. They've brought the experts through that have helped us answer those questions and navigated those questions when we had them at times, to give us options or to think through things. And that to us has been really valuable. It's a processing facility of any kind is all about flow, right? And how do you get product to flow through there and people to flow through there? And we've really spent a lot of time on our building design and looking through that of how the product would flow, how the people would flow. Those things are really key.
So talk about the people flow, and you mentioned the labor standpoint before that. what are you doing to make sure that you have employees to keep product flowing through your facility when it's all done?
I kind of looked at when we started this process and having these conversations, there was three major areas that we had to really feel that we were confident in answering or finding the people to help us answer as we move forward. One, I look at them as kind of in my brain as silos, but one of them is like, how are we sourcing the cattle? Where's the labor? And then how are we selling the meat on the other end? So labor was one that we spent a lot of time in the beginning having these conversations, right? Like, I don't think anybody really grows up saying, what I really want to do someday is cut meat, right? But I think they haven't had those opportunities. And it's been surprising as we've gone down this journey of people really starting to ask about it and to question it. So we have found the right experts to help us with our South Dakota Department of Labor, with working again with the protein processing company. They have brought people to help us address that. We know, though, we're going to have to be creative, right? Like in rural communities like ours, it's going to take creativity to get it fully staffed. But we're confident. I mean, we have people already in our small town stopping us on the street, asking us when we're hiring. I think they see it as a great opportunity that has, set hours. We won't have weekend work. We won't have shift work. It will be, during the day, normal hours. We may open early on different floors, could do different flexibility. I mean, we're going to have to be flexible in how we approach the position, but we're going to have benefits and we're going to pay a higher wage than other businesses in our community. And we're going to train people to have this job. We don't expect them to come with skills. So there's those opportunities. I feel in our community has always been very progressive. I think we can pull too from other surrounding areas because we will have good wages and good benefits for jobs.
And then automation, we've tried to put as much automation into the plant as we can to really reduce that some of the worst of the physical labor. So there's a lot of things you can do that maybe weren't as available in years past, but now you can put lifts on some of the equipment. So you're basically we're pushing carts and you push a cart onto a lift, and then that can dump, say, meat into a grinder or into the stuffer or some of those types of things. You're not having to, pick up lugs of meat and, lift them up over your head and dump them. And so those are, a lot of those, and it's kind of common sense thing, but it takes a little bit more money, but that really widens your labor pool, right? You don't need to be a weightlifter per se to come work for us. We can take a lot of people with different skills and different abilities and find a home for them in our plant. So that was really important to us as well.
Are there any other automations that you're kind of excited to bring in, or any other like specific aspects of what's going to be in the plant that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. One is maybe not automation, but just I would say this flexibility. So we would be able to, we're going to do as much custom work as we can, whether it's just, an individual wants one freezer beef a year for their own personal use, or if you've got other ranches like ourselves that are doing some direct beef sales, and we want to do as much of that custom work as we can because we know that need's been out there for a long time, and we're going to provide we'll have the capability to do custom labeling. Obviously we can track all the carcasses and know where everything comes from and put your label on it, put it in your boxes if we need to, and then get that back out the door to you. So, and then being able to do different things, like I talked about, we'd have the grinders so we can do that, but then portion cutting, roll stock packaging. We're going to have 2 smokehouses in the facility, so we can do all of your sausages and snack sticks and jerkies and those kind of things. We can do wet aging or dry aging, either or. And then, we're going to have a retail outlet that goes with it as well. So we're going to do, like I said, as much custom work as we can. And then at 25 head a day, that's, we're going to buy some cattle as well to run through the chain. And we're going to market that beef, probably in a couple different branded lines. And so having all of those pieces in there gives us a lot of flexibility to sort of adjust to whatever the market's telling us, whether it's, seasonally or as we go through the cattle cycle. on a longer term basis, however that is. We think that's going to be some of the key to our success.
Do you see that custom work as something, I mean, I know you're not quite into it yet, but do you see that being something that's going to be more challenging on the labor front or bring up other challenges compared to just being more straightforward with what you're offering? Or do you think it'll be more beneficial in the long run?
No, I think when you get into the custom, you're gonna have different cutting directions, right? Or instructions that you're gonna need to be following. We've talked a lot about, how do we get that communicated to on the floor. I think some of those ways that we can do that though, is we're probably not gonna, it's not gonna be a one custom beef comes through and then it's two that we bought for go here and then one more custom. And we'll probably have days that are just custom work, and you just kind of got to know that every time you start cutting, you got to make sure you're looking at the right instructions. And then there's going to be days when we're just doing all, they're all the same. And along with the beef, we're going to offer pork and bison as well. And that's probably going to be the same type of deal. We're probably not going to, we'll do hogs one day a month or something like that. And that's all we'll do. So we're going to try to be a little bit smart on how we schedule things. So it's not so haphazard about what's coming down the line. We just know today's here's what we're going to do, and tomorrow's maybe going to be a little different. And I think too, that sort of work is kind of fun too, because it's not just the same thing every day over and over again.
But I think too, like they've come a long ways in software that's available for that. And like one of the plants we toured on the TV screens in the fabrication floor is the cutting instructions, right? So it's not just this piece of paper that has to follow it through, or, like you're imagining some of our smaller, more custom type lockers haven't been able to invest in that kind of technology perhaps, or maybe didn't want to. There is so much technology out now that helps with that information. And so I think take some of that margin for error perhaps out, because it will be so much more knowledgeable for the people that are on the floor. They can just look at the screen and be like, oh yeah, this is what we're doing, and this is and that. And so I think there's that kind of information that can flow that helps your employees be successful, because they'll have that knowledge.
Awesome. So what are you going to do for like a rendering facilities? I know that can be a challenge for some of the smaller plants. So what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, that's another big question that we get a lot, and is one of the big ones we had early on as well. And so rendering is a challenge. There's really not much rendering available to us that's economically close enough. And so we've spent a lot of time talking about what's the options there. And so we've come down to is that we're going to be installing an incinerator on site to get rid of any of the offal that we're not using. But I think that also one of those things that keeps us on our toes too, because everything you're dumping into that incinerator is costing you money as well. Yeah. And so what can we do to avoid dumping anything in there that we might find something else we can do with it? So, we've talked about different options as far as, could we do something with some pet food lines, some custom grind for some of those types of things. Because we got smokehouses, we could, could we smoking some bones for dogs or, pets and those kind of things. And we found an outlet for hides. So we're actually going to have a hide room in the plant. But yeah, then, so we're going to try and be creative, and as we go through, continue to look at what can we keep out of the incinerator as much as possible. But we'll have that right there. And I think that'll be better. I guess the best option we have at this point.
Are there any other like businesses in your area that would also find use out of that incinerator, where it would be like split costs or anything like that?
Yeah,
or is it just
we've talked about
that.
Yeah. We give our veterinarian, who's also our friend and our neighbor, we give her a hard time about, we can get rid of her mistakes that way. So But yeah, I mean, that's just it. We've where we're building the plant, they've got a brand new hardware store there. And, obviously they have some cardboard waste and some of those things. And we've got, just because of our location, recycling, it really isn't an option. And And we know we got to have a certain amount of dry matter that goes into the incinerator. So you got things like that, or scrap pallets, or you know, you start to think about those kind of things. And so yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily a money maker per se, but yeah, it might be kind of interesting if you have, you know, it's like a lot of things, maybe wouldn't have thought about that before, but all of a sudden you have this thing in your community, and sort of lets you start to think about, well, what's the better ways to utilize some of that stuff.
Going back to the community again, around how many employees are you anticipating needing once you're up and running?
We'll need about 25 people on the floors, working. And our community has been very supportive of this. Probably for the last, I don't know, COVID always throws things off, but the last 3 to 5 years, the economic development has a community meeting here in our community, and the need of a processing plant has come up in the top 5 all of those years. So our community has been very open to it. They've actually tried to recruit people to come in and open a processing plant over the years, and it just hasn't been successful. So we're very excited that we have that support. That's often one of the questions we get pretty early on too, is, well, how does your community feel about this? And so we're very fortunate in that way that, as I've said before, we have a pretty progressive community, and they have been supportive in every way.
Hey folks, I want to take a brief break to talk about one of my favorite calving books. And you know, if you're tired of the hassle of managing your cattle records, I want to introduce you to Cattle ID because it will do the work for you. The Cattle ID platform makes it easy to store, share, and collaborate on all your herd information from your mobile device. It saves you a lot of time and effort. Plus, you get access to actionable analytics that can help you and your team make better decisions for your ranch. Don't just take my word for it. Try Cattle ID and feel the magic of hassle-free ranch management for yourself. Seriously, sign up now and see the difference it can make for you and your team. There's a link in the show notes. So what do you want beef producers to know as they kind of hear your story and hear that this is becoming an opportunity, because it's going to serve more your local area? But let's break it down, and let's start with like local beef producers. What do you want them to know about what you're going to be providing for the community and the resource that you're building?
Well, I think we've had a lot of conversations with producers since the word has been getting out that we're building the butchery, and I refer to it as dreaming, because a lot of them haven't been able to really think about expanding their direct sales business or even their freezer beef kind of sales because they can't get them processed, right? And for us to start to have these conversations with them to say, we could do more, and how do you start to ramp up on your end to be prepared and be ready and think about all the things that you need to think about. You can really hear people start to have serious plans that they're putting together, and new business outlet streams for them, and how our business can help them reach that, right? Like Troy said, by putting on custom labels and being able to put it in boxes that they want, or just those opportunities. And I think that's what's been huge. And these aren't just probably, I'd say, in our local area. We're having conversations from hundreds of miles away, because people can bring a whole trailer load or a semi load. We'll be able to take a semi load and house them overnight. The ones that we're not able to process during one day, we'll be able to process them the next. So those start to change the game when you can have those conversations with producers about what it means to their business and their enterprise, and could they bring a child home because they can add this new enterprise, or can they develop something different than even they've been allowed to think about, because we just don't have this in our state, and it could allow that.
So you talked about finding the right people earlier, but how did you make sure you were finding all the right relationships? Because you're looking at the rural economic side, you're looking at the design side, there's got to be environmental regulations, you're looking at USDA inspection. Like you know way more all the hoops and regulations and everything you jump through than I do. I'm just, going off of what I've heard other people say. So how did you make sure that you found all the right people and connections to get those squared away easier?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stacy and I were in a unique position to kind of tackle this project just because of some of the experience we have had in the past, and the network of folks that we do know. I think that's all played into that. And so I would say we knew more than enough to be dangerous to get started on this. But I mean, we had a pretty good working knowledge of, the basics of what this would take. And then you got to find the details. And so, as we were looking around and trying to find the right folks to help us, essentially you start making phone calls, right? And you ask people, and if they don't, maybe they can't help you, but maybe they know somebody who can. And you continue to go down those paths, and it's like a lot of things in life. You can tell pretty fast if the folks you're talking to kind of know what they're doing, or can graft your vision of what you're trying to do. And that was kind of how it played out here. So I think the key with this is that it's it doesn't happen fast. Like I said, we've been working on this for over a year and a half at this point. And it takes a lot of time. It really does, because there's a reason that these haven't been built, any of them in recent times, hardly, because it's a big undertaking. They're very expensive. There are a lot of hoops to jump through. You got to figure out everything from where you're going to get to cattle to where the wastewater is going to run out of your plant. And how do you handle everything in between? And, like Stacy said, just from even the time we started on this project to now, the economic conditions that you're dealing with. I mean, interest rates as we all know, have doubled or tripled, and the cattle cycles feels like it's in a completely different spot than it was a year and a half ago. And so those are all the things that continue to add up in there. But I think one thing that this has done is it showed us how important it was to have this flexibility in the system. When we first got our feasibility study back, that suggested don't do any custom work, right? The money is in buying cattle and selling beef, because cattle were pretty, mediocre priced, and beef was high. And today it's almost flopped. I mean, cattle have come up, fat cattle have come up in price. Commodity beef prices have been a little stagnant. And now it says, geez, you should do more custom work. So we've learned as we've gone through, even though we haven't, tipped over a shovel full of dirt even on the project yet, we've actually learned a lot about the process and the business side, just from continuing to watch our model and continuing to put new data into it and see what it tells us to do. And I think that right there tells us we started with the right people, because we do have such a good model to continue to work with. And so it's gone good though. But there was time last summer we really had to sort of pump the brakes. There was a part of it that we were trying to figure out that was taking more time, and some of the first thoughts we had or advice we were given on how to handle it, we honestly weren't comfortable with it. And so we kind of pumped the brakes, and we made some more phone calls and found some more people to talk to, and through our network, and friends of friends type thing. And we're able to put together an answer that we were comfortable with. And that's, you don't want to make stub your toe too early in this process. So it's okay to, as frustrating it is that it takes this amount of time, it's okay to slow down and make sure you're doing it right.
Excuse me, good starts are worth it.
Yeah,
it is. I think I've been so grateful at how generous people are, right? So people don't see us as competition, or they just want to share their knowledge and their information and help you navigate things. I really do think that most people are good people that want that, right? And we've just been really fortunate, like Troy said, with our network, to find those people really quickly to get those answers and help us navigate when we run into these little snags.
So where is this beef going after it leaves the plant? Like you said that some people are doing customs, right? So maybe if they're doing direct to consumer, like, obviously they're in charge of part of that, but where else is it going? Like, is it going to go into local grocery stores? I know you mentioned like restaurants earlier, like where's this beef going to end up?
Yeah, that's a thing that we'll continue to work on. So, the what we're working off of right now is our own personal experience of marketing our own beef, and that's a pretty small sample size compared to this project we're talking about. It's going to be over 6,000 head a year. So all of those have to grow together. Kind of when Stacy was talking about the silos that are all connected, but we got to have enough labor. We got to have enough cattle, and we got to have markets. And so we can't harvest more cattle if we don't have enough labor. We don't need more labor unless we got cattle lined up, and none of that matters if we don't have a market for that beef, right? So all of those sort of have to all rise together. We planted a lot of seeds out there. We can't go to anybody today and price it and say when we're going to have it. It's a lot of theoretical conversations, obviously, but we've turned down a lot of restaurant business in the last year. And so just getting back with those folks and continuing to update them on how we're getting along with our construction and where we're at in the process. But yeah, we've really got, we've got a lot of options. It can go into grocery stores. We can, we'd love to get into more restaurants, continue to grow that business. We're going to have a retail store right attached to the butchery, where people would come and buy it directly from us. And so, I would say the answer is a little bit all the above. We'd love to get it into wherever people appreciate it, and would like to have that locally raised South Dakota beef.
We've started, like Troy said, starting to build those relationships, because the business side that we'll be on is going to be, about relationships. We might not be the cheapest price products that they can source out there for beef and pork and bison, but one of the advantages we'll have is the story behind it and that connection that we know that people are craving and want to do. So we've started that, and we know that those relationships then will turn into those opportunities to sell meat to them. And that's one of the things that we can be doing right now and have been working on pretty heavily.
So what have each of your roles been in this project? Like, how do you split that up? Because you're probably not doing the same things. So what are each of your roles been?
Well, up to this point, it's a huge team effort.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say there's anything we've been able to split off and say, well, you go figure this out and I'm going to go figure this out. I mean, this takes a lot of teamwork and looking at a lot of things from a lot of different angles. And so it takes a lot of that bouncing off and figuring that out. So I don't know that we've had any real split roles too much at this point.
No, I think the motivation to keep each other, because this is a intensive, like Troy said, project. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of things. So we just, I think, probably have helped keep both each other accountable, both keep us motivated, when one's like, oh, I don't know, and the other one will be like, oh yeah, this is how we're going to navigate this and get it done. And so, I mean, one thing Troy and I have always been is a real powerful team in tackling things like this. And so it probably fills our drive, like we were probably wired to do something like this. Thinking back, I mean, we just really work well together and process. We each see things differently, but really connect on that level. And we received a MPEP grant, a meat poultry. I never remember what the acronym is.
USDA grant, called Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program grant.
Yeah, the MPEP grant. And so I'm fairly good at writing grants. And Troy has decided he will never like to write another federal grant again. So we found his limit there. Yeah. He thought of writing I think our grant proposal when it went in was how many pages? 441
pages long.
Yeah.
So you said 441?
441 pages long.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. So it's a journey. Writing a federal grant is what I call a journey. But yeah, has decided that's not his favorite part. But it did pay off for us. We were awarded $2.2 million to help us with the project, and that's been a huge boost, obviously. Just to know that you're a group of your peers that have reviewed that grant feel that your proposal is well put together too. And then obviously the financial part of it has been huge too, but I think there's just those things that we brought to the table that we each have, and just our network, I think, has been huge that we both called on and see, utilize our network in different ways.
Yeah. And then time. I mean, it takes a lot of
Yes.
time to work on this,
Yes.
so because we are involved in all the other segments of, raising cattle, those obviously that has to come first. And so you got to find time, whether you're making phone calls while you're in the payload or feeding or, a lot of working on it in the evenings, obviously. And so that's probably where the big split is, who's got time today to work on this and trying to figure out how to handle the workload too. So it's, up to this point, it's taken time and money
That's all.
to get this far.
Yeah.
Nothing major.
Nothing major.
No.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up today, looking at the big picture, like in the next 5 to 10 years, when you look at the beef industry, what do you think is the biggest change we're going to see as beef producers?
Well, I think our hope is through this is just that we've got a little more redundancy in the system. I mean, COVID showed us that we got some pretty narrow bottlenecks. It's a big industry. We raise cattle everywhere in this country, and yet at the very end, that funnel gets pretty darn tight. And when you have one little blip in the issue, whether it's COVID or a plant goes down for whatever reason, I mean, it sends shock waves through the system, and it takes us months to dig out. And so I think that's one of the lessons we've learned was that, we just need more redundancy in the system, and we got to spread our risk out a little bit more through this whole process. And so, obviously there's a lot of issues in the industry, and you can sit here all day and talk about those, and a little 25 head per day plant in Faulkton, South Dakota isn't going to solve all of those. But for us, it was like, what's a step that we can take? Not too many people are set up to go build a new 6,000 head per day plant. And in my opinion, we don't need another one of those, because you're right back to where you got a handful of these. And when a 6,000 head a day plant has a trouble, it's shut down. When a 25 head a day plant has trouble, it's shut down too. But we don't, it doesn't cause so many issues. And so I think as we look forward, to me, it's more about what do we do to get more of these types of facilities into more rural communities. There's a lot of places in cattle country you could build a 25 head per day facility and have enough water, have enough labor to do this. There's not many places you can build these giant plants. And so what about spreading these out a little bit more and getting a little bit closer to the cattle, and hopefully in 5 or 10 years we can say, hey, yeah, that wasn't a bad plan to have a few of these around. So.
Yeah, I think what they could do to boost some rural communities, and when I look at, the opportunities in 5 to 10 years that we could see in our rural communities, to say, could that next generation come home and offset, working in the plant, maybe, like I said, where it's going to take creativity, and then they still be able to be home helping on the place part-time, because there's always enough labor to go around, and especially in the cow-calf segment, but not always enough cash flow to support a full-time families. And can our plant help give that dream to families to have that flexibility and that opportunity, and it's a win-win. So I agree with Troy. There are so many challenges that we could talk about in the industry side. I more like to look at it and say, what can we create with opportunities to address those challenges? And that's where we feel the butchery really is able to do that in our little corner of the world.
Well, awesome. Thank you very much to both of you for being on my podcast and visiting with me today. I really enjoyed your story. And where can cattle producers go to learn more about what you're doing? Is there a website? Is there social media? Where do you want people to go to?
Yeah, you bet. All the above. NorthPrairieButchery.com. You can check it out there, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter as well, at that same deal. But as you're looking at this and you're thinking about it, what I tell people is if Stacy and I aren't going to be able to do all of this on our own. We can't just magically two of us make this happen. So we need a lot of support from other producers. So as you're looking at our information and thinking about it, and thinking about what could a 25 head per day beef, pork, and bison processing facility mean to you, or if you've ever said, boy, I wish we had something in our area, or I wish we had something in our region like this, then we really encourage people to get on there and find our contact information on there and just give us a call, because we're going to need support to make this happen. And that's what we're really encouraging people to do today. So yeah, check us out at northprairiebutchery.com.
Well, awesome. Thank you very much again.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on that one, folks. Thank you for tuning in today and joining in on the conversation. Be sure to take this a step further and take the advice you learned and implement it on your operation. If you want to have a conversation about it, head over to my social media and send me a DM by following @CattleConvos and connecting with me there. Have a great day.